Destiny during COVID and stuff. Like, they did a $1.5 million, like, upgrade to their already expensive, like, Bellevue, like, an expansion to their studio. Like, they, like, make no mistake, Destiny made a lot of money and was a very popular game. Very popular. Now, yeah, most lucrative, alright, it's not Genshin Impact, right? Like, let's, like, alright. But, yeah. Alright, hey guys. Be honest. Be honest. How many of you bought a $15 or more emote in Destiny 2? And don't lie. Don't lie. Never, many times. How many of you... Someone said, I spent thousands on B2. I did. Not once. Yep, true. Me, many times. More times I'd like to admit. I only bought the DLCs. Okay, alright. No, but I bought this $20 Star Wars skins. Gotcha there. Dude, like, I spent hundreds on silver. That's the thing, guys. Like, not only was Bungie getting millions of people to buy these DLCs, bro, I knew people that bought every single cosmetic. Like, every single one. Like, let's be honest, guys. We spent some money. And so, yeah, this is like... There's money in an IP. The Destiny name has value. Now, how much value is it? A lot fucking less now, right? But it's still like... It's the Call of Duty analogy. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 did significantly worse than recent Call of Duty. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 sold the same on launch. It made so little money. It was equivalent to 2015 Call of Duty. So it made, that's how, like, you have to go back to 2015 for how little Black Ops 7 sold. It was compared to 2015 Call of Duty. That's pretty significant. Maybe it's still more than Destiny 2, but the point is, because you have like a bad selling limit at the time or something, like the Call of Duty IP has so much value. Like there's always a reason to make another Call of Duty because everyone's heard of Call of Duty. And Destiny is up there. It really is. Like, so many people have heard of Destiny. Is that enough? Is the value of the IP enough to resurrect the franchise? Maybe not. Mactix here, my good friend Mactix. Tall guy. Strong guy, Mactix here. I never imagined the day would come so soon that Destiny would be gone. Does anyone feel absolutely gutted right now? I'm there. You know, get another tweet I'm gonna look at. He says, maybe I'm just stupid, but Destiny 3 seems like such a clear and obvious choice that, and it infuriates me that whoever is calling the shots seems okay with letting the Destiny IP just fade away into nothing. Thank you, bro! True! Real! True and real! And Sparrow says the same. I just can't come to mind this way. We might never do a day one raid again. Might never feel that feeling of working together to solve an ARG or secret in this amazing world. Might never feel that sense of community again. I just don't get it. And it's so true. It's like, yeah, like to me, it's like so obvious. Like, we needed a Destiny 3 with File Shape. Okay? We still need it now, guys. Like, I don't know. Is it really too late? Is it really too late? Dude, everyone, like, hey. I mean, the freaking clip from earlier when I was asking who would get Destiny 3, everyone was like, you know what? You get Destiny 3. What is going on now? That's right, Moist Critical. Dude was a Destiny 2 gamer. He did a bunch of day one raids, guys.
For me personally, it's still sad to see. I am almost certain that Destiny has had the most potential out of any FPS we've ever had. I have probably spent a couple thousand hours in Destiny 2 on console and PC. Some of the most memorable gaming moments in the world come from doing raids with my friends.
Everyone loved it, dude! Like, freaking Moist Critical is not out here making a ton of Destiny content. Bro's got thousands of hours just playing for the love of the game! Playing because he loved it! We had people like this playing all along now.
It is some of the best content
16%. Telling me there's a chance.
So the news broke the other day. Destiny 2 ending active development. That was the news video. Today I wanted to share more of my thoughts and what I'm thinking over this first day. I'm thankful, and of course unsure about the future of the franchise and videos here on the channel. We'll also take a look at a
Why does this guy sound
Destiny 3 petition.
AI as fuck?
As I share my thoughts, I'd like
I'm going to try to be as coherent here as possible. This video is unscripted. We're going to speak about Bungie, Destiny, Marathon, and how Bungie ultimately got here. I feel like I have a reasonably good kind of historical understanding of the events that have occurred at Bungie over the last 5 years or so, which have ultimately brought Bungie to the point that they're at now. I am, however, not a business person, so I can only use common sense in regards to how big Destiny has been as a franchise and how mind-blowing it seems that this is all wrapping up and that Bungie didn't bet on the future of Destiny, which has ultimately put them in a position, especially under the influence of Sony, where all the studio have left is to hedge their bets on Marathon, and that is despite Marathon's poor performance at launch. It seems that the studio are so embedded in this plan that there is ultimately no room to turn around and go in a different direction. This week, Bungie announced the end of service for Destiny 2, or the end of live service, so that essentially means that after June 9th, which will be a somewhat significant update in terms of content reprisals and quality of life for the game, they have no future plans to continue supporting it. The dev team did indicate that they would love to continue working on the Destiny franchise and universe, but following that statement, Jason Schreier, who's reported lots of stuff about Bungie correctly over the years, indicated that from his sources, Bungie are planning to lay off essentially the bulk of the Destiny team following the update that drops on June 9th. And I think that puts Bungie and Sony into a position where essentially the goal is to leave the Marathon dev team in place to put a significant amount of effort into trying to turn Marathon around. But if that doesn't work, I think Bungie as we know it will certainly cease to exist. But many folks will wonder, how do you get to this point, right? Destiny has been a massive live service franchise, one that many studios have tried to imitate. Look how many looter-shooter live service games have been produced since Destiny became big. The reason for that is that everyone wanted to taste of that success, and they thought perhaps this would be an easy venture. It turns out it is not easy. We know that purely from Destiny development alone, but it's something that has followed Bungie for many years, and ultimately, because of that struggle, but also because of other decisions that Bungie have made, we've seen the events of this week actually play out, right? When Destiny 2 released, Bungie had made a number of big missteps in terms of core game design around Destiny. They removed random rolls on weapons, they simplified subclasses, they generally simplified and watered down the Destiny experience in a way that the core audience for the game really didn't enjoy. I believe the biggest reason that that happened, while Bungie tried to suggest it was about making the game easier to understand and easier to balance, I think the core of it comes down to Destiny always being a very difficult game to produce and one which required a massive amount of resources. So Destiny 2 was the first kind of swing in a way of trying to ultimately adjust what Destiny is and go in a different direction that was easier to manage and produce content for. That did not work. And a few months after Destiny 2 had dropped, as was later revealed by Justin Truman, the studio were within weeks of ultimately running out of steam and having to shut the doors. They had a partnership with Activision at the time, which retrospectively was what actually saved Destiny on a handful of different occasions, and this was the biggest one. Because Activision clearly gave Bungie lots of resources to try and make it right, and eventually we got Forsaken, which was hugely successful, and it kind of set Destiny back on the correct course, right? We had some kind of small ups and downs, I guess, following that with Shadowkeep, and then Beyond Light, which, given that Bungie had now kind of shored up the foundations of the game and the franchise on a financial level, because the right resources were going in, Beyond Light was a very successful expansion in terms of financials and things, which meant that Bungie could feed that success into the things that followed. That's when we got Witchqueen. But it was around this time, and with the COVID pandemic and everything that had been taking place, Bungie generated loads of revenue from Destiny. And there are a number of reasons for that. Lots of people were forced to stay at home for extended periods of time, which amplified the engagement of communities in video games. It wasn't just Destiny, but also other media sources, right? Publishers were eating really good at this moment, despite the unfortunate circumstances circumstances that actually created that ecosystem. And with that success and the money, Bungie, in terms of their leadership, opted to expand the studio significantly and start to spin up various different incubation projects. They spend massive amounts of money on the studio itself, which being in downtown Bellevue is an immensely expensive place to operate from. And because they saw this kind of pool of money that Destiny could produce, that's where they committed to adding another expansion to the roadmap with an outline for Lightfall and then the final shape to drop. And I think ultimately, because Bungie was spinning up these other projects, Marathon being one of them, this ended up being the big mistake, because Bungie leadership had put them in a position where they had so many liabilities, right, that they began burning cash at a really alarming rate. And so Bungie leadership were trying to sell the company in order to essentially save it. I know there were talks with Microsoft around this time, and it kind of looks like a potential bidding war between massive companies like Microsoft and PlayStation. But Microsoft cited at that specific moment that Bungie's burn rate, the amount of cash they were actually spending to sustain Destiny 2, to start incubating their other projects, to maintain the real estate that they owned, Microsoft saw that as a huge problem, and they said no to the deal. I think it was within a few months of that Bungie instead managed to make a deal with Sony. Sony bought Bungie for $3.7 billion, something like that. And you kind of wonder why exactly Sony chose to do that, right? Sony obviously either saw something that Microsoft didn't, or were willing to take a much bigger risk than Microsoft were. And perhaps there was pressure because Sony thought they might miss out on something really good here if they didn't snap it up. And so they did snap it up. And the crazy part is that despite Destiny being successful around this era, whether it was between Lightfall, which wasn't critically received in a very good way, but was still financially pretty successful, and then the final shape, all of these things were absolutely huge. Despite all of that, it was referenced many times between Bungie and Sony that those pieces of content did not meet their financial expectations, and I think it actually wasn't all about Destiny in a lot of ways here. What perhaps instead was happening is that all of the pressure was being put on the Destiny franchise to produce the revenue to keep Bungie afloat, and so in a strange kind of way, Destiny ended up being blamed for not meeting those targets when actually it wasn't Destiny's fault. If Bungie were operating in a world where the focus was on Destiny and they hadn't made crazy decisions in terms of expanding the company and increasing their liabilities, if none of that had happened, it seems quite possible that the story would be very different now. But nonetheless, the Destiny franchise ultimately did kind of take the hit for those failures. It wasn't long after the Sony acquisition that we saw the first round of layoffs at Bungie. This was a few months to a year before the final shape dropped. But the dev team still managed to get the final shape out the gates. They did generally a very good job on it. And in terms of the Destiny franchise in isolation, once again, it performed very well. But after that, I think it was literally only 2 months tops. It was another round of significant layoffs at the studio. And so it tells you that despite all of the success the Destiny franchise was actually having, something was going very wrong inside of Bungie. And I believe, looking at the way they expanded the company, span up numerous other projects, tried to juggle Destiny, which they'd already struggled to maintain purely on its own, I think those were the mistakes that ultimately got Bungie into the position where they were after the final shape. And so following that, another kind of critical thing occurred, because when the episodes didn't perform as well as seasons in terms of player numbers, and when they kind of looked at the metrics and the player drop-off after the final shape, which was partly influenced by the fact that this was the end of the saga, Bungie formatted this content in that way specifically, right? That meant that despite the fact that Destiny still had lots of potential, Bungie started pulling resources away from it, because at this point they were well into production on Marathon. And essentially, Bungie started hedging their bets on Marathon instead of Destiny. There was a period in between where they tried to operate with the dev teams being more or less split, right? So Destiny was spinning up the Fate Saga plan, the one that ultimately led us to Edge of Fate. But a lot of their best resources in terms of talent and on a financial level was beginning to be poured into Marathon instead. And the reality is that it was just clearly not feasible to sustain Destiny without the correct amount of input. I think it's actually a testament to the talent of Bungie, to be fair, that they managed to pull off what they did with Destiny after the final shape, given the amount of pressure that they must have been under. And I know many Destiny folks are not big fans of Marathon, but I also actually think that applies to the Marathon team, because what they were able to achieve in that couple of years, actually pulling both of these franchises behind them and managing to hold it together just about somehow, is incredibly mind-blowing, and it really does speak to the talent that exists at Bungie. But we have to keep in mind, it was the leadership of the studio that first kind of settle on this course to where things would eventually become unsustainable. And every time things didn't work, in order to keep Bungie afloat, they had to lay off more staff, downwardly revise their plans for these franchises, and they ultimately at this point had got themselves into a spiral, right? We're burning too much money, we need to find ways to burn less money. That ultimately meant taking resources away from the projects, take resources away from the projects, and the outcome is ultimately worse. And that's why Tyson Green and the Destiny team saw that they had no choice but to try and streamline Destiny development moving forward. That ultimately meant that we ended up with things like the Portal. So you've got this vicious cycle of things going wrong because of bad decisions, and the outcome of those things going wrong is that more things go wrong. And so ultimately, I believe that the downfall of Destiny as a franchise, and potentially Bungie as a studio in general, right, because this isn't over yet, Bungie are giving a big shot at making Marathon a success, because they have no choice at this point. They can't turn around and try and make a go of Destiny. It clearly isn't feasible to do that, partly because of the sunk cost component where Marathon has absorbed so many resources, and Sony specifically, I assume, have put a lot into getting Marathon out of the gate. And because Destiny's been on this downward trend, that's where they kind of pitched their remaining bets. I think it's an incredibly sad story, and it speaks a lot to the greed at the top of companies like Bungie. I remember a year or so ago, whenever it was exactly now, Steve Parsons stepped down as CEO, and that was a huge red flag because while Bungie was saying they still had plans for Destiny, and they'd announced Marathon at this point, which had its own poor set of struggles, the CEO is stepping down before you've finished delivering on those plans. I think it says a lot about how much faith they actually have in those plans, right? And that was the double-edged sword of Steve Parsons' departure from Bungie. On one hand, you had up yours, good riddance, right? But on the other hand, you had the question of, if this is happening, it's signaling something bad. But none of us really needed to be rocket scientists to assume that things were going bad. Now, as I've said previously, I'm quite a big fan of Marathon because I like PvP and I like looter shooters, and ultimately, those are two very core pillars of what Marathon is. But I still believe that it was the wrong bet to have made, and we all know why that is. I think if Bungie had been far more careful with the money they'd made from Destiny, they'd put the resources into the right place, which should have been Destiny 3, and ultimately zeroed in on what they knew could actually work, then things would be very different right now. But that's a basic overview of how we got here, I guess. There are plenty of nuances and things that we've missed out here. At this point, given that there are rumours or reports that Bungie are about to lay off another massive amount of their studio staff, which is going to put the dev team at maybe 400 or 500 people if they're lucky, it's very clear that if Marathon doesn't pan out, what remains of Bungie will simply go away. Either that they just simply close the studio or absorb all of its resources, which is more likely, and put them into other parts of Sony. The one small piece of hope that we might have, given that Sony ultimately own Bungie and the franchises, is that Sony may seek to recoup and push forward with Destiny as a franchise in some other way, but that won't be inside of the Bungie structure as... We know it right now, and of course, it will be a long time away if it indeed does happen. It's immensely sad, man. At this point, like I've said, I'm still kind of just absorbing it all and trying to make sense of it in my head. But I'll be here for the June update. I'll be here for Bungie's final communications about Destiny, and to cover where they go from here, whether they can make a go of Marathon, and whatever ultimately happens at that studio. So you can keep it locked and loaded for that, as well as other gaming news stuff, because I think that is probably the most likely future for my channel. But that is kind of a minor footnote in what is a really sad time for the Bungie community overall. Cheers for watching, my friends. Focus on the...
Oh, hello. Not a bad pull. Shame that. Hello, wow. There's something special.
I forge more than hot.
Yeah, the like the unique chance on obols is so low.
Well, it is now officially the end of the week here in the stock market, and man, oh man, did we have a wild week. We have some stocks going down, like Nvidia, although they gave us an absolutely fantastic earnings report that blew expectations out of the line. We had some stocks going up, like AoD breaking out a major growth at the beginning of this game that a lot of people expected. We have the SpaceX IPO, which is going to be coming sometime in June. This set the stock on fire. Some people hated it, and some people loved it. I mean, again, this was like a case after stock that's huge. You got the so because we love this a lot, what I wanted to do today is just to kind of wrap things up and do a quick little recap of what all happened this week, specifically for AoD and Micron and Nvidia, your two favorites. And then what we're going to do is we're going to specifically talk about the good and the bad. Because I'm not going to lie, this week was full of a lot of good. There was a lot more good than I was expecting this week, especially for something like AoD, and especially for something like Micron. But at the same time that we are getting these good signals and good clues, there are some bad signals and bad clues. Some things that I'm a little bit concerned about going into next week that I want you to at least be aware of. Because remember, my goal on this channel isn't to just be bullish 24/7. It's to give you my honest, genuine belief of what I think I'm saying or what I think is going to happen. Whether that gets me more or less views or not, I don't care. Genuinely couldn't care less. I want to give you my honest perspective. And there are some things that I am a little bit concerned about going into next week that I want you to at least factor in and take into consideration. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do today. So let's not waste any more time at all. And let's get straight into it. So first and foremost, we are going to be talking about Nvidia, okay? Because what Nvidia has done throughout the last 4 or 5 days, honestly, has been better than a lot of us were expecting. Because what has happened historically with Nvidia is that they will drop their earnings and then it gets nasty from there. I mean, dude, just go look at their last earnings report right here. Their last earnings report was totally fine. Guidance was great. Everything in many capacities went correct, but it still fell off the cliff. We saw Nvidia put 2 days in back-to-back, one of them down 5%, and then the next day right after that fell another 4.5%, dropping nearly 10% over the course of 48 hours. We didn't get that this time around. Yeah, we got a bit of a pullback, but in our reality, if you look, we got a 2%-ish pullback on one of those days, and then the next day, yesterday, we got another 2% pullback. So the amount of red that we saw over the last 48 hours was about 50% less than we've seen, especially recently. And that's not even just that last earnings report. Look at the last one before that. That last earnings report we saw on the day that it dropped, the price fall from open to close, roughly 3.2%. And then the time before, and then right after that, we saw that pullback go stretch at least to 4.2% at one point before closing at 1%. But all in all, especially for the last 6 months, 9 months, Nvidia has performed much better over the last 48 hours following their earnings than we've seen most times, to be honest. And one thing to actually factor into consideration is that the day that they dropped earnings was actually ended up in the green after close. So that's worth noting, right? And so at the end of the day, again, like I mentioned before, this was a fantastic week for Nvidia, all things considered. Because sure, we all want to see Nvidia's price just absolutely rallying after a great earnings, but the truth is that they're an A+ student, and whenever they bring us back home a test score of A+, we kind of just expect it at this point. It's not something that's really going to get this going. Now, does that mean they're not going to continue to climb? No, of course they're going to continue to climb over time. It's just not going to be purely based on earnings reports like it used to be a few years ago, right? Them beating expectations of their revenue by a couple $2 billion isn't going to send it up 10%. It's just going to be the natural progression that moves them up 8%, right? And so when it comes to Nvidia, we have gotten some great signs. Now, we've also got some concerning things. There are some things with Nvidia that are concerning me, but what I want to do is I'll save the things that are concerning me for like the next half of this video. So let's talk about that was the good, right? We've outperformed this week, especially in comparison to what we usually do. I'll get into the things that are concerning me in a second. Now, when we go to Micron. Micron, man, what a battle, dude. What a week it had. What an absolutely fantastic battle that it put up. We obviously did see Nvidia's earnings coming in right here on Wednesday, and even from them, Micron put in that absolutely beautiful move upwards, pushing to 730, then from 730 up to 764, before pushing at one point all the way up to 780, now coming back down towards 750. Again, Micron does have a tendency to show fragility. It does get a little bit weak after an Nvidia's earnings, and I think it makes sense, right? Whenever you have the major player in the space price falling 10% in 2 days, naturally the smaller players and their partners will, if not, they don't always have to pull back, but they will usually will show weakness, and we didn't really see much weakness from Micron this week. It really gave us a beautiful move. It gave us a beautiful move up into that golden zone that I told y'all about in that last video, and it's done a fantastic job, okay? And so when it comes to Micron, I don't even need to over-explain this. It just did a good job of pushing upwards into a major resistance zone, even following Nvidia's earnings, which usually can bring weakness to it. did. And when it comes to AMD, I mean, the star of the week. Wow, wow, wow. What an absolute beautiful move this thing made. It obviously went to earnings with a little bit of fragility. It came into the week a little bit fragile. But on Wednesday, I mean, this thing started absolutely tearing things up, pushing all the way from 410, 420, up to 445, up to 450, up to 470, up to 480. I mean, it was a wild move. But I told you guys, you know, I did tell you guys. You remember in that video, I said, guys, if it breaks through that golden zone, it absolutely can first and foremost come up to 471. That's exactly what happened. It came up to this golden zone. I said, hey, be on the lookout. See if AMD breaks through this golden zone, because if it does, this thing could send it up to 471. And sure enough, where did it stop at exactly? Look at this. And I'm not one of those people who tries to rub it in your face like I told you, but look, I mean, it's hard to. It's hard not to in this moment, because look where it stopped. It came up to 471, which is your first breakout target, and it immediately reversed off of that level, the exact level that we were talking about in that last video. Absolutely wild. And I told you all, if it breaks through 471 and stays above it, 495 can be its next stop. It didn't get to 495 because it couldn't break above it and stay above it, right? So we hit the nail on the head with that AMD move, right? And now, of course, it has pulled back just a little bit, and I'll get into that, and that is the part of what's concerning me a bit. But all in all, I mean, AMD, wow, 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 what an absolutely fantastic move. Taking a little bit of that market share, making the big boy move. I like it. I like it a lot. So overall, when we look at NVIDIA, when we look at Micron, when we look at AMD, they have all made some absolutely fantastic moves this week that should give a lot of AI investors like, you know what? This space is still moving in the right direction. But with that in mind, there are a few things that are concerning me going into next week. Because just like there are good things that can happen, there are also concerning things that can happen at the same time. This market isn't binary. And it seems like, you know, a lot of people on YouTube, they tend to focus on one or the other, right? A lot of people on YouTube, they've built an audience of really bullish investors. And so when they make content, all their content is super bullish. That's all they want to talk about, because they know it gets the best views, the best engagement, the best subscribers. Or the other people are kind of like doomsday YouTubers, and I find it funny. I think it's an interesting way to live, but whatever. Everyone, you know, to each their own. But what they do is they make super gloomy content. Like, always, it's gonna crash, it's gonna crash, it's gonna crash. And their audiences adapt to that. They want to see that. I don't want to build either one of those audiences, if I'm going to be honest with you. And if you're one of those, I don't really want to build an audience like that. Okay, my audience, what I'm trying to build here, and this is a brand new channel, so whatever, you know, we just hit 10,000 subscribers yesterday. No flex. But the audience that I want to build is one who's aware that there are good things that can happen, good signals that can flash, bad signals that can flash, all at once. And our job as analysts and investors is to then dissect that and say, okay, there's good, there's bad. Which one do we think weighs more? And then that gives us an idea of what we think is going to happen. Like, all right, I'm slightly leaning bullish, or I'm slightly leaning bearish. That's the sort of analysis that I've done. And through doing that, this is the reason why I've found decent entry points that have allowed me to find gains of over around $72,000 in the last year. That's the way that I play the game. And everyone has their own game, but this is the way that I play it. And so with that in mind, now that we've gone through the bullish things that have happened over the last week, let's talk about some of the more bearish things that are just concerning me. I'm not super worried, but definitely a little bit concerned going into next week. Now, the first thing, the major thing that's concerning me going into next week, okay, is the fact that we are now seeing NVIDIA's price at the bottom side of this massive ascending structure. Okay, so do you see how NVIDIA put in this low, and now it's right at the bottom side of the structure? Well, what I need you to understand is that historically, these sorts of ascending structures break down. It's just what happens like 80% of the time. 8 times out of 10, you'll see the price fall out the bottom side of that structure. Or in the simplest terms, 8 times out of 10, NVIDIA's price will come back down and fall below this line of support that it stopped at yesterday and fall back somewhere around $210 to $203. Now, that's not a crazy big move. It's not the most scary move ever, right? I mean, that's only 2 to 5%, but it is worth noting. Because the truth is that once you fall out of this structure, you do start to sometimes cascade back to the downside, and you can start a pretty decent sized pullback from there. Like within a very fair world, within reality, it is super reasonable to assume that if NVIDIA falls below this structure, it easily could come down to like $203 or maybe even $195, which is another continued move to the downside of possibly 5 up to 10%. And I mean, guys, we're talking, that's hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap that could be lost pretty quickly from NVIDIA pretty reasonably as well, okay? And so, yes, it's done a great job of still performing great this week, and it did better than it usually does, but at the end of the day, my concern going into next week is that we're going to see Nvidia fall below this support and start taking out 203 or start taking out 195, and that could create a great buying opportunity for some investors, but that does also mean that some investors are about to face some red in the next week that could be a little bit stressful. Now, I don't think it's going to be terrible, and I've told you throughout the week that if Nvidia falls, I don't think it'll be terrible. I don't think we're going to see some huge 25-30% collapse like everyone's been calling for. But it definitely could set up some sort of continued move to the downside, right? Some sort of breakdown of this upward progression that it's made from March 31st to now. And I definitely want you all to at least keep it in mind that this is possible. It's not the scariest thing on earth, but I'm basically saying Monday is the day where we'll find out. If on Monday Nvidia's price starts falling below $215, just know we have those breakdown targets. One's at 203, one's at 195. And it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest for Nvidia to come back down to those levels and then start trying to balance out somewhere around there. Maybe it starts to threaten that shoulders pattern, right? Maybe it starts to threaten some sort of continued breakdown, and then we get some sort of micro reversal, right? I could see all of these things playing out. Those are just guesses. I'll actually figure it out in a moment. But going into Monday, I need you to be aware that Nvidia could, at any given moment, come back down below 203 and 195. It could start coming back down to these levels. Now, I keep saying Monday. One thing that I forgot, and I need to make this clarification. The market's closed Monday. So Tuesday. Okay, so not Monday, Tuesday. I nearly forgot that because I'm used to saying Monday. But still, yes, you need to remember going into next week in general, this zone right here. This is what you need to be watching out for, okay? So yes, Nvidia's done great, but there is a risk. There's kind of like a threat. Nvidia's basically going into next week standing on a cliff, wondering if it's going to jump off that cliff towards 203 to 195, or is it going to maybe sustain the support, push back up towards 237 one more time. That is possible. I'm not going to pretend like it's not possible, but I would say only really give that at best a 30% chance. I think we have about a 70% chance of it pulling back towards some of these lower levels, and about a 30% chance of Nvidia giving us another run back up towards that high. And so, how am I handling this with Nvidia? Oh, I'm just not doing anything, right? I'm not scared of this. I'm not gonna I'm gonna sell my Nvidia because it might fall 5%. I don't care, right? It's not that big a deal. No, I'm not gonna do that, right? I'm not gonna sell stocks because I think they're gonna fall a little bit. I'm a long-term investor. I'm not someone trying to get rich by tomorrow. So no, I'm not gonna sell it. But one thing that I actually will say is that if we do see Nvidia come back down into this zone, I actually might do a little bit of buying on, my stocks, because I think that there's a world in which it can try to balance here and try to find some sort of micro reversal. Maybe not a full send reversal back upwards, but I could see a micro bounce coming. So I'm willing to buy that zone. So I guess my game plan is to, load up a little cash, get a little bit of cash ready, just in case we pull back towards these levels. Then that's where I'll do a little bit of buying. Okay, so just be aware that it's coming. I'm not telling you it is. I'm just telling you there's about a 70% chance. Okay, now with that in mind, let's move over to Micron because the picture is similar. Okay, so when it comes to Micron, the good, like I mentioned earlier, is the fact that it did such a good job. Like, we saw, of course, earnings come in. We saw Micron pump. It broke through this red zone of resistance that was rejecting its price at first. It cleared through that zone of resistance, and it broke into that golden zone. You remember I made a video talking to y'all about this zone.
That was a bunch of them. None of them hit.
Look how good of a job Micron did at just getting into it. I mean, look at the 4 hour. This is a better look.
Not even a pretend hit either.
Just pushed straight up into it, and it stayed in it for a while, then went to the top of it for a little bit, right? That's not an easy thing to do. And I told you all, it's not easy to even get close to the golden zone. So the fact that Micron's in it is a sign that these buyers are here and they are buying. I mean, they're buying some Micron. They're excited about Micron, and that's a good thing. It's a good showing of strength. But on the flip side of it, going into the last 6 hours or so, maybe of Friday, what we can see is that Micron did start to reverse, and Micron did get rejected. And as you can see, it tried to push to the top side of this, maybe trying to follow the lead of AMD, but it wasn't able to. And it started to get that reversal, get that rejection back to the downside, and that could set Micron up for some sort of continuation back towards the downside going into next week. Now, the beautiful part about this with Micron is that it does actually have a lot of support below it. And if you don't know what support is, it's basically just levels below it that can hold the price up and try to push it back up, okay? But there's a lot of support below us. There's this previous zone of support on that double top that we got threatened with not too long ago, back on May 12th. So there's going to be a lot of support between 727 and 79. And then there's also going to be a bottom side zone, which I will explain in future videos, that ranges between $699 and $678 right here. So there's a ton of support below Micron that easily can hold the price up. But the reality is that going into next week, it is going to be trying to swim upstream. It has all this selling pressure sitting directly above it right now. And it wouldn't shock me at all to see that start to try to push it back towards the downside. And I would actually go ahead and assign that about a 70% chance of happening as well. The 30% chance is that maybe something good happens over the weekend, and that does send us upwards into this golden zone into next week. It's just going to be hard. Once you get rejected, it's hard to immediately go back in. What you usually do is get rejected, come back down, find support, and use that support to push back into your strength. And so Micron just immediately reversing will be a bit difficult. And again, I would say only about a 30% chance that happens. About a 70% chance that Micron starts coming back down towards some of these lower targets, maybe in towards like, 720-ish level before then trying to find a bit of support and pushing back up towards the top. So I have a 70-30 split established there. And the very last one is AMD. Okay, now AMD has performed substantially better than both NVIDIA and both Micron. And I would actually go to say that the downside risk for AMD isn't so much in the short term, it's more of what we're seeing in the long term, the mid, right? Because in the short term, AMD's done a great job. I mean, it put in this high, it put in this low, it came back up, broke out of the structure, broke out back, held support, cleared through the golden zone, and sent it back up to the very first price target that we had at 471 before getting rejected. And what it's doing right now is normal. It's coming back down a little bit to try to establish some sort of support, to try to take out this high because it's struggling right here. This is normal. Everything AMD is doing in the short term, none of this is concerning at all. This is beautiful. I mean, this is absolutely picture-perfect, beautiful price action from AMD. Not even remotely concerning about this thing. What I'm a little bit more concerned about is what I'm starting to see develop on the daily time frame. Because on the daily time frame, the picture does start to look a bit different, okay? And what I'm seeing is that AMD is struggling to pick up strength. So although its price is going up, and as you can see, I mean, it's putting in a high, and a higher high, and a higher high there. Although it is going upwards, you can see that daily RSI is trending downwards. And I've explained the daily RSI, the RSI indicator a lot recently, so I'm not going to over-explain it right here. But in general, whenever you're seeing the daily RSI, this purple line going down while the price is going up, it means that although the price is going up, it's losing momentum and it's losing strength. And historically, when that happens, especially for AMD, it does have a tendency to see the price actually pull back as a result of that. For example, if I show you just the last time that this happened, it was right here. AMD's price was trending upwards, its RSI was trending downward, and then bang, it started to pull back right after it, okay? And I'm not saying that has to happen, but this is what you know. Because if you're someone who's just going up,
One of the problems I have with technical analysis when it comes to stocks is the market conditions are completely different now for AMD than they were. He's looking at the last run-up, which was 2 years ago. I think maybe even 3 years ago. During COVID, maybe? 23, 22, before the dip. AMD was a far weaker company than they are now. Like, this is when technical analysis, you have to start looking at like what's actually happening in the market and what's happening in the world.
all in every single day on AMD, you need to be aware that, hey, it's not picking up strength. Yes, it's going up, but it's not gaining momentum. And that could change. It might start to really rally and really pick up momentum, but it would need to start going up to like $528. Right? There is a world in which this push towards the AMD could be one of the slower ones, one of the weaker ones, and maybe it is full of pullbacks, or it's followed by a larger pullback as it is losing strength as it goes towards the top side, as it needs to then reset and then continue to chase that 600. I think AMD is probably going to chase that $550, $600. I could see that happening. Certainly.
Yep, I see that as well.
And so because of that, obviously, my whole thought process is, look, short term, AMD, I mean, I couldn't be more proud of the AMD holders out there, and especially those of you who did kind of take that even main call that we had of 470 and capitalize. Congratulations, right? But I would be a fool and naive to think it can never slow down. Because when you see that daily RSI sloping downward while the price is going upward, it means it's losing strength, okay? And you just have to be aware that in the longer term, things are getting harder, right? The higher it's going, the harder it's becoming for it to go up. And that could be followed by some sort of pullback or some sort of slowdown for a while. And that obviously could derail some of the hype and the excitement that many of you have. So just be careful. I'm not saying it's in a crash, you need to sell everything. I'm just saying you need to be careful. Because remember, my goal is to give you the good, my goal is to give you the bad, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing as a result. So how would I handle something like this with AMD? Well, personally speaking, if I had this big old bag of AMD that's up a lot, this is one of those moments where as it's pushing upward,
Take profits.
slowly trimming a bit of profit off.
Yep.
Now, if you're a long-term forever holder, just leave it alone, obviously. But if you're more of that, short-term, mid-term investor,
It depends on what you're doing, but yeah.
you like to capitalize on your profits. Yeah, this is where I would start to slowly take some profit off the table. Now that it's pushed back above 460, because it's showing you that it's getting harder and harder for the price to go up. If I'm someone who wants to buy AMD because I feel like I missed the train, what I always recommend is you can start slowly buying now, but save a little bit of cash off to the side because, you know, more often than not, when you start to see that daily RSI slowing down, you will get some sort of buying opportunity, which is either the price just going sideways or the price starting to slowly trend back down. Right? And so you usually will get a bit of a buying opportunity, but I'm never one to say completely stay on the sidelines because you never know. AMD literally might just do that. It might not care and just go up because it's that strong and it's had that much beautiful price action recently. So you don't want to just fully sideline yourself. So my thought process is enter in slowly, but do stack and save a little bit of cash on the side in case that RSI is correct and it slows down and pulls back. That's how I enter in moments like this. And when it comes to Micron, I'd be doing roughly the same thing. When it comes to Micron, I'm sitting here saying, okay, there's a very real world in which Micron's price gets rejected back to the downside because it just hit that major wall of resistance. So if I was trying to buy Micron, I think you're probably going to get a buying opportunity sometime soon. I think Micron easily could come back down towards $700 over the course of next week, back into this red zone, or maybe even a bit lower towards 670 to 680. And those could serve as great buying opportunities as it does try to create some sort of stabilized structure here at the top of this zone. So I think you're going to probably get some buying opportunities from Micron next week. And yeah, I'd probably capitalize on that. So with that in mind, you know, as I'm sure you can see now, none of what I've said in this video is, oh my God, everybody sell everything. You got to get worried. There's no need to be like that, right? The goal is to assess, all right, upside risk, downside risk, upside potential, downside potential. Here's what I think could happen in the worst case scenario. Here's what I think could happen in the best case scenario. Here are my percentage chances of it going up. Here's my percentage.
I really like this guy's thoughts on the market. He takes a non-YouTuber approach for someone who's YouTubing. He's very calculated with how he discusses it, and I like it. Not many people are doing that right now. I'll be curious to see where he goes or what his trajectory is. He's this channel's growing pretty rapidly.
Welcome back to Paul's Tech News. We have come to it at last, the year's great inflection point, 2026's elbow, if you will. And if we are lucky enough to make it past, God only knows what trajectory we'll end up on for the second half of the year. For me, this annual crossover is usually marked by the coming of Computex, which usually takes place in June, at which point the year is pretty much halfway over, so we can just coast the rest of the way through to December. And given how downhill most of 2026 has been so far, the best we can make of it is to coast for a while. Cheers. But first, a journey to Taipei, Taiwan for Computex Week, which is usually one of the year's highlights when it comes to PC hardware. But this year, I'm not so sure. The pickings might be slim for those who aren't AI data center enthusiasts, but I will hunt down the consumer desktop stuff nonetheless, and I will also seek to answer a fundamental question. Does the current shortage represent the slow, agonizing end of the PC building hobby, or is the industry just regrouping for an epic post-shortage comeback? It could happen, and so could tech news. Cheers. Today's video is brought to you by Thermaltake's Wood Series cases, adding a touch of warmth and style to a variety of existing chassis designs, such as the TR200WS, seen here in the white snow finish, showcasing light-colored wood-textured accents while maintaining the TR200's core features, such as easily removable side and top panels, magnetic dust filters, and support for an optional 6-inch LCD screen. Black cases like the TR300WS are paired with darker maple-inspired accents for a warm and stylish aesthetic, and of course the case still includes a tempered glass side panel, excellent airflow, and support for 360mm radiators for AIO or custom cooling. Thermaltake's WS chassis lineup includes other cases from the View series and more, so for further details click the Thermaltake Wood Series sponsor link in the video description. So in case it wasn't obvious, I'm going to Computex. Joe's coming too, and so Tech News will be on hiatus for a few weeks, returning June 21st. Normally, the week leading up to Computex would be rife with early announcements and sneak peeks at new components that are expected to launch later in the year, and while there has been a smattering of those, one would expect more. Several smatterings at least. But right now, unless large-scale AI data centers get you off, you probably want to avoid the list of keynotes and forum sessions on offer at Computex, as their topics are basically AI buzzword mad libs at this point. That's not to say there will be nothing for consumers. Intel has an Arc G3E chip, E stands for extreme, built for handheld gaming that looks promising as it will use a B390 GPU, and NVIDIA also has the N1X SoC, which is expected to be on display in some capacity. Exciting in that it is a rumored 20-core ARM-based CPU paired with an RTX 5070 level GPU with 6,100.
Interesting, actually.
But early rumors point more towards this powering AI-focused laptops with
Never mind.
28GB LPDDR5X RAM setups, though it will likely arrive in a variety of configurations. Still, if you're a desktop PC enthusiast, and most particularly gamers, Computex fan service is looking weaker than an Overwatch 10th anniversary event. No new CPUs or GPUs, and the manufacturers who make all the other parts are clearly dialing back to wait out the current dry spell. So it's no surprise that PC gamers are also putting build and upgrade plans on hold. The Tom's Hardware survey showing that 60% of PC gamers have no plans to build a new PC in the next 2 years. And if this year's lesson is that patience is a virtue, that's cool.
I think you're going to see a dramatic change in the PC gaming landscape. The PC building landscape, I should say. Probably the PC gaming landscape too. Starting at the end of this year. It's already happening, but the 2 years coincides with when the RAM is suspected to ease up. Problem is the CPUs are not. They're just now getting started. So you're gonna have a CPU shortage probably by the end of the year.
We can wait it out. But there is one glimmer of hope for those truly in need of a PC
CPU shortage for consumer CPUs. I should be specific on it.
AM4 paradox, where it's cost-effective to build on AM4 because of DDR4 memory, but all the good X3D CPUs are sold out. The Ryzen 7 5800X3D
It's already happening.
Anniversary Edition has been spotted with a nice little packaging upgrade, but more importantly, a tentative early price listing of $310. Now that's from Indian retailer 99deals.in, mind you, so far from official, but it would be awesome news if confirmed, particularly if AMD makes a lot of it. NVIDIA, meanwhile, has shown just how much they care about gaming by removing gaming as a segment entirely. From their financial report, that is. Gaming is still there, it has just been lumped into the edge computing category, which is a change from prior financial breakdowns. You might ask, what is edge computing? I don't think it really has a meaning, to be honest. It's just a term C-suite executives like to use to sound, edgy. For NVIDIA, though, the edge computing category now covers AI PCs, GeForce RTX GPUs, game consoles, workstations, AI RAN base stations,
This is the only reason I come here for this.
Meaning it will no longer be possible to quickly compare NVIDIA's gaming metrics to their data center earnings and say, wow, look how small a slice of NVIDIA gaming makes up now. Why do they even bother anymore? Even with the new grouping, edge computing was only $6.4 billion out of NVIDIA's $81.6 billion from last quarter. And personally, I do still think NVIDIA cares about gaming, but only from a PR standpoint. They don't seem to care how small their gaming business gets relative to their whole company, but they sure as hell care when someone brings it up and uses it as a point of criticism. But not anymore. Classic NVIDIA. Anything to get an edge. Speaking of things being on the brink, if you tuned in last week, there was a dire looming threat of further disruption to the memory supply chain. So what happened with that? Samsung's memory fabs would have shut down for more than 2
They're on
weeks.
strike.
The workers' strike had kicked off as planned on Thursday. But additional last-minute government-mediated negotiations managed to bring both parties to terms, at least temporarily, on Wednesday. The dispute was over bonus pay in light of Samsung's enormous profits since the chip shortage began, and the initial agreement will provide chip division workers with a $416,000 bonus just for this year, as well as a 10-year commitment as the union had hoped for. But per Samsung's request, the bonuses will be paid in company stock. The Before it was put on hold, more than 48,000 workers had signed up for the strike.
Hey, I'll take a
And while
$400,000
agreement
bonus.
has been reached, it still needs to be
Stock or
voted
not.
on by the
You
union
gotta be
this
kidding me.
As RAM-related news in 2026 goes, this one seems to be coming to a rare happy ending, and now PC gamers can go back to just paying 300 to 400% markups on DDR5 instead of the alternative, which we can only assume would have been much, much worse. Okay, it's time for Tech Briefs. Tech news condensed into cute little bite-sized pieces. Google fundamentally changed the way the internet works forever at Google I/O on Tuesday, announcing the intelligent search box that will make sure you use AI for searching the web, whether you damn well like it or not. At its heart is the ability to create, customize, and manage information agents that can work in the background to track changes on the web and alert you to new information, but the capabilities get way scarier than that. Like the announced Ask YouTube feature that will provide AI-generated answers from YouTube videos without you even needing to watch them, or the Omni remixing tool that will allow anyone to remix a short to swap out a person or an object or a soul perhaps, and then put that on the internet as if it was their own. It's not like the internet is getting any better, Google apparently decided, so might as well make it worse. Where are the alternatives to the big three memory makers has been a big question in recent months of shortage as the world could use a bit more memory, and so Chinese manufacturers like CXMT seem poised to fill that gap, as your mom likes to say.
It's not going to help.
That seems to be happening, as Corsair, who you
Price
might
is
have
still
heard
going to be
of,
high.
seems to have sourced DRAM chips from a business that is not Samsung, SK Hynix, or Micron. As shared by WXNOD, Corsair has a single DDR5 6000 SKU using CXMT memory. And while the timings are mediocre and availability outside of China is questionable, the road back to RAM normalcy starts with baby steps. And more RAM suppliers working with brands like Corsair is a step in the right direction. Rounding things off with a couple more products likely to show up at Computex, Asus, HP, as well as Honor and Chewy recently launched thin and light laptops that start at just $450 based on Intel's Core Series 3 Wildcat Lake mobile processors. Apple's recently launched MacBook Neo is an excellent product for those in need of an inexpensive but functional laptop, so the broadened competition has led to an answer on the non-Mac side. Unfortunately, these will only be available in China at first, but they'll likely reach other regions in the future, with prices in the $500 to $700 range, and some even come with 16 gigabytes of memory. While it's little consolation for desktop enthusiasts, it is at least still reassuring that inexpensive computing options are still out there. Before I close though, one last reminder. There will be no tech news for several weeks, but we'll be returning on June 21st. And in the meantime, there will be a build coming this week, lots of Computex coverage, and a handful of other videos as well. But there you have it guys, tech news for the week. And if you liked it, click that like button or leave me a comment down below. While you're down there, all the articles I talked about today are linked in the video's description if you're interested in reading more. And you can check out my store at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more. Subscribing to my channel is always a good call too. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you in the next video.
I want to be clear that this video is not intended to be a scare you away from 8GB GPUs video where we only test things out at maximum settings. I'm going to intentionally also test out reduced settings in order to get a realistic picture at what is the actual compromise of using an 8GB GPU in 2026. Specifically, I have identical 5060 Ti's here, other than one is an 8GB model and one is a 16GB model. They're both the same model from PNY on the coolers, so we can get a direct comparison, apples to apples, other than just that VRAM difference. Now, as you can see, my daughter gave me some stickers today, so enjoy. That's what's going on there. But also, as you can see, it can make a pretty dramatic difference when you're at certain graphic settings that do go beyond 8GB. So another thing that we're looking at in this video for game selection is I wanted to focus on literally in 2026. So we're looking at the biggest games released in 2026, and we'll be looking at what I think if you're building a gaming PC in 2026 with this, expensive hardware, a lot of people would be going for a 1440p monitor, but might be using upscaling in order to get decent performance there, which can actually reduce the amount of VRAM required. So again, I'm trying to target the realistic use case you might have playing new games on an 8GB GPU in 2026. Now, the biggest release so far this year is Resident Evil Requiem, and we can see here that, yeah, you can reach absolutely solid frame rates on a 5060 Ti at the max settings plus RT high using DLSS balance, which looks pretty good here, on the 1440p output, and those same settings absolutely break on an 8GB GPU. You can see that the graphics just literally don't come out correctly, in addition to the performance penalty, where we're at 75 FPS versus 47, leading to a 60% advantage for the 16GB card. But realistically, this isn't about the performance difference so much as what you're getting is locked out of using these graphics settings. That's what's happening if you're buying the 8GB GPU. Now, why I think it's really important to revisit this in 2026 is GPU pricing. The thing is that memory prices have gone insane, and that has led to the GPUs with more VRAM getting price increases, and has also led to prioritizing specific models for supply. All signs point to the fact that NVIDIA on their 8GB cards has prioritized the 5060 Ti 8GB. It's actually sitting right around its MSRP, whereas all the other cards in their lineup have gone significantly above MSRP, some more so than others, and the 16GB 5060 Ti has been hit pretty much the worst, other than once you start getting to like 5070 Ti and 5080 and up type products. So the 16GB card, currently I'm looking at $515 for the least expensive
Jesus
one versus
Christ.
$80 on the 8GB
For a
card.
5060?
Huge price difference.
That's insane.
Now I should also mention that while I'm not testing it side by side in this video, AMD does offer a 16GB 9060 XT, which have not had quite the crazy price increase that we've seen on the 5060 Ti models. These are hitting about $440, and they do have roughly the same performance as a 5060
Oh
Ti,
boy.
like 5%
Back in my day, dude,
slower.
$600,
And
$400 was a
feature set differences
fucking
and all of that.
7900.
But if you are looking for a 16GB card in this price range, you might want to research the
Absolutely
5060
insane pricing
more.
on
But
GPUs.
again, the point in this video, why I'm matching the 5060 Ti against the 5060 Ti, is so that any differences that we see can be for sure because of the VRAM difference. So, this is what it looks like if you load up the biggest release of 2026 and you try to play it on a 1440p display with DLSS balance at the maximum graphics preset. This is what you get. You get a really good, very playable experience that looks great on the 16GB card, and you get a broken visual experience on the 8GB card that also doesn't have a lot of performance. You also might not even realize that the visuals are literally broken. You might actually think the lighting in the game just looks bad, but it doesn't look bad when it's working properly with enough VRAM. And again, as I was showing in that intro shot, when you're getting into like this cutscene here is where it becomes really apparent. But again, if you didn't have the side-by-side, you might think that this is what the game is supposed to look like, and just think that honestly the graphics look really bad, especially the lighting. So that's one of the issues that you run into on the 8GB cards, is sometimes it's actually unclear what's causing your problem. Now I also wanted to look at what about trying to use native resolution on both GPUs. If you're trying to play at the max settings plus RT high on even the 16GB card, the native resolution is a bit too much. But the DLSS balance did look good, so I thought those were realistic settings to test. And that's the biggest thing, is when we're having the problems on the 8GB card, is it at settings that would otherwise be usable? That's a pretty big deal. The other thing I wanted to test out was this game does feature path tracing, so I did try that out. It is broken on the 8GB card, and the performance is terrible. But as you can see on the right-hand side, it's not like the 5060 Ti 16GB is getting an amazing path tracing experience here. This is with balanced DLSS. You could go down to performance mode, pick up a little more performance, and then maybe use frame gen. So in a single-player game, I know there are some people who would make that choice, but I think overall I'd probably steer clear of the path traced settings on the 5060 Ti. But once again, that's what it looks like side by side in that scene. The lighting is just completely broken on the 8GB card, in addition to the issue with just
I think I'm done, dude.
being low. But
I
this
think
is
I'm
what I
done
mean
with
about
this game
this,
for a
this
while.
video is not intended to just be a scare video
Oh, that's good.
flaming 8GB cards. I really want to talk about the actual trade-offs that you're getting. So if you just switch down to the normal graphics preset, essentially medium, but that's what this game calls it, and turn the ray tracing off, and play at 1440p native resolution, both GPUs do absolutely fine. We see a 2% performance difference, but I don't see signs that that's probably causing issues with the graphics or anything like that. So it seems like a good experience on both GPUs here, and you could go ahead and turn on balanced DLSS on top of these reduced settings. And now we're getting 110 FPS versus 108 FPS. It's just overall like a high refresh rate experience on both cards. So what I really want to look at then is this. So when you're buying the 8GB card instead of the 16GB card, what does that mean? What it really means is you would be playing at different settings than the 16GB card. So this is more like what the difference in experience might be. On the 16GB card, I might go with the max settings RT high with DLSS balanced, whereas on the 8GB card, I might go with the normal settings RT off and DLSS balanced. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
think I'm
it
done.
looks a little better on the
I think I'm done
right-hand
with Diablo
side,
for
but
a
it's
while.
not like the left-hand side actually looks that much worse or anything like that. So,
that's funny.
it's nice to have the increased visual fidelity, but I'm not trying to say that you just can't play games on the 8GB card. Now, another huge release for 2026 is Forza Horizon 6, and at its maximum settings, which is called Extreme Plus RT, and again, using DLSS balanced on the 1440p output, once again, the 16GB card, it does great. Completely usable settings. A lot of people might want to have this be how you play the game. Averages 70 FPS in the built-in benchmark, which is very reflective of the actual performance throughout most of the game. And the 8GB card is sitting down at 38 FPS.
Moral of the story, don't buy an 8GB card in 2026 unless you're playing on 720p resolution. Just don't do it. Yeah, I think I'm done. I don't even want to do the last Legion event. Don't care enough to do the Nightmare Dungeons. I feel like I've done more than 24 Nightmare Dungeons, but whatever. Layer key. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm good. Could try another Mephisto, I guess. See if I can get a, yeah, honestly, I don't even want to do that. I'm good. Quite happy where I'm at. Quite happy where I'm at. I don't even want to do war plans anymore. The grind of war plans just burned me out. Like, absolutely burned out of this game. I had to give some feedback to Blizzard. They need a 1/3 of the XP to level up warplanes. Maybe even 1/4 of the XP. Like 25% is what it should take to get to 10. Or make it account bound, but probably 25%. I have no desire at all to level an alt just because of how dumb warplanes are. I was building for an alt too, and then I realized that I don't want to do warplanes ever again. Yeah, overall, expansion was good. I don't even want to do the Legion event. Like, usually I try to finish all of this. I have no desire to try to do these Nightmare Dungeons. I could go fishing, don't care enough to do that. Yeah. Necro's fun, for sure. Infernal Hordes suck, as always. They haven't gotten better. I've still yet to do one of these. Never will. Yeah. These need to be account bound. You unlock them once, they should always stay unlocked. Or fix the bug in escalation dungeons to where they don't kick you out. Yeah, I think I'm done for this season. That was fun. That was what, about maybe a month of straight gameplay on this? I can't say I didn't get my money's worth for the expansion. Good job. I'm gonna stop the stream here. Yeah, have a good one. I might restart it again, but I'm gonna switch games.